I'm Carl King, the temporary host of the Carl King Podcast, where I talk about music, filmmaking, and general creativity stuff. Quick shout out to my music endorsements, Vienna Symphonic Library, Fractal Audio, Ernie Ball Strings, Toontrack, and Millennium Media. Those are 5 companies who make amazing musical gear that I love to use. Now let's get ready to get started. Today, I want to jump right into an announcement. Carl King actually wrote and released a new song this weekend exclusively for my Patreon patrons, and it's called I Hate This Song. And here is a 30-second clip of it. It's overproduced, there's an idiot mumbling through a wobbling auto-tune. This is a bunch of swill, can't sing, can't play, they've got no musical skill. I hate this song, I hate Can we turn it off now and check out something else, not listen to it all day long? I hate this song, I hate this song. The idea wasn't bad, but now I'm super sad cause they did it all fucking wrong. Well, that sounded good, didn't it? To hear the whole song, just join my Patreon for $1 a month. But to get the high-resolution WAV download, and also alternate mixes, join for $5 a month. Aha! That's the Carl King conspiracy at work. Back when I first started my Patreon account, I intended to write and record and upload an exclusive song every month, only available through Patreon. And last week, I started considering that again. Is that something that I want to do? I would think some of my music people would be into it. Well, Friday, I spent the whole day writing and recording I Hate This Song. By the way, you've probably noticed it's got truly embarrassing cover art that I want to apologize for. As you can see, it's a photo of me with my shirt off, and my hair in this particular moment was a slovenly mess. It looks totally unprofessional. It wasn't my fault, but I actually was not ready when the photographer snapped the picture. A lot of you have written in, but I promise you, I'm still trying to work things out with the label to get them to change the cover art. I know a lot of fans are disappointed with me, because that's just not who I am or what I stand for. Now, let's just say there might be a lawsuit in the works. And we'll leave it at that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the song, and I'll try to get a new one up on Patreon every month, hopefully with more flattering cover art. As I said before, I have a whole list of new song ideas in Evernote, and this was just one of the many I could grab off the list and knock out. Before we finish this segment, I'm actually contractually obligated in perpetuity throughout the universe to thank my $50 a month patrons, both Chubode and Hank Howard III. People who have been listening every week know that we have a bidding war taking place over there between those two. And this week, Chubode has taken the lead again. $50 and 3 pennies. It's what we in the business call a Patreon penny race. Now, folks, or peeps, as John Cooper calls his Christian podcast listeners, this is truly getting out of control. We can at least declare at this time that Chubode is Carl King's best friend again, but there's no telling what might happen by the next episode. Okay, let's do a Carl King the Human update. I'm Carl King, the Human Update, and I'm over here at my Los Angeles studio, Plosive Central, and it's the late afternoon. The sun is blasting through my windows. It's 91 degrees F, and this week, Carl King is thankfully feeling pretty healthy because I've mostly recovered from COVID. Some of you may know the only physical activity I participate in, other than stacking up hundreds of hard drives, is cycling, also known as bicycling. You know, I put on those tight spandex outfits and ride one of those super light bicycles with the little skinny tires with my butt way up in the air. I've got cool gloves and a helmet and those shoes that clip into the pedals. So if you come to a stop and forget to unclip them, you will crash into the sidewalk. So my usual rides are 20 to 30 miles at most. And this summer, it's nice and hot out. So I'm hoping to get in some good bike rides again soon. Do some bicycling. Hey, I haven't done any film review segments in a while. And Michael C. Stone, the drummer, has made a request. So let's start off with that. This week, I've got 3 of them. First up, we've got Hellboy 2019, starring David Harbour and Milla Jovovich, directed by Neil Marshall. Let me just say that if this movie is what you're looking for, then this is the movie for you, no question about it. Hellboy 2019 starts with a lot of backstory and what filmmaking experts call narration. You know, for instance, as we watch it with our eyes, the narrator will say, quote, "Arthur severed the Blood Queen's head." It's like play-by-play. He literally describes everything that is happening right there on the screen. And this goes on for like 3 minutes. And for some reason, it was all cut together like a YouTube video. I don't know why. Must be a thing kids are into. As I kept watching, it became obvious that the people in Hellboy's universe like to state facts at each other. It's like the dialogue is a lot of, "I want this," "the dog is brown," and it's just walls of dialogue. Everyone talks all the time. And, you know, some believe that movies are largely a visual art, but the makers of Hellboy 2019 said, "No, sir. No, ma'am. That's not what this movie's going to be." Hellboy 2019 is not a movie about characters experiencing things, which the audience could then experience through empathy, or sometimes it's called mirror neurons, I think. Instead, it's a bunch of imaginary people standing around or running around, reciting facts. Later on in the movie, there are even some monks who took a vow of silence. And I noticed that even they would write loud dialogue on handheld chalkboards. Hellboy himself makes a lot of dry jokes, and I get what the writers were going for. By comparison, there's a Netflix movie called The Gray Man that I saw the other day, and I found Gosling's dry jokes or witty comments to land a lot better than the jokes in this Hellboy movie. Now, I don't know the origin of that sort of thing, those little comments, but you can find some dang good ones in The Big Sleep from 1945. In that old film, a woman meets with a detective played by Humphrey Bogart, and he walks into the room, he shows up, he's all sweaty, and he's got like handkerchief, he's wiping his neck, and she says, "My, you're a mess, aren't you?" And he responds, "Oh, I'm not very tall either. Next time I'll come on stilts, wear a white tie, and carry a tennis racket." For some reason, the woman doesn't react to his bizarre statement, and the conversation just continues. And I, of course, also have no idea what he's talking about, but both versions of The Big Sleep are full of those witty detective comments like that. By the way, if anyone listening knows the original source of that style of dialogue, let me know. It could have actually been from the books of Raymond Chandler, which the film was based on, and I've never read any of his books, so I wouldn't know. You can also find that kind of stuff all over Bruce Willis movies, too. It's become like a necessary ingredient to anything that has a lot of action. You know, like Hawkeye and Scarlett Johansson having a clever conversation in the middle of a battle against a bunch of aliens coming down from the sky. There's probably a term for it, maybe like deadpan snarker or something like that. As I said in this reboot, Hellboy is played by David Harbour, and you may know him as the police chief from Stranger Things. But I was skeptical that Ron Perlman could ever be replaced with another Hellboy actor. I thought, Ron Perlman is just so perfect as Hellboy, you can't mess with it. But David Harbour actually did a good job. I thought he had more of a Lebowski take on the character, coincidentally, and he almost resembled like a beat-up, sweaty metal musician. The character makeup was definitely well executed, so there was no complaints there. Another notable actor was Troy James. I had to look that one up. He's a contortionist who performed the body acting of the character Baba Yaga, and that was pretty wild. It's another one of those situations where it's hard to cast anyone else as that character. You've got to have just the right person with that wild contortionist talent to do that. And also, considering it was a male playing a female, it was totally convincing. And I thought Baba Yaga and her hut were cool imagery and wish we could have spent more time there. As far as the plot goes, this is another movie about the end of the world. Because these days, the stakes always have to be the end of the world. About 20 minutes in, we get another voiceover narrated exposition scene. And whenever I see this sort of thing, a red flag goes off. In general, I think movies should stay like in the here and now of the narrative. And that if you have to spend so much time with backstory, maybe you are actually making the wrong movie. But if you love being taken out of the moment and seeing other times and places, this is the movie for you. At some point, there was a Nazi character who had big red and blue 3D glasses. And I thought that was a really cool character design. I didn't catch the significance of that character, and I honestly don't remember what Nazis had to do with the story. But hey, Nazis were there for sure. I do believe I saw them. And as the movie goes on, I'm sitting there thinking, man, why is there so much narration? At one point, I actually wondered, do I accidentally have the audio description turned on my TV? You ever watch a movie with audio description? Because that's an experience. But then again, everything is an experience except for the occasional non-experience. Felt like the makers of this movie didn't let the scenes breathe for a moment. You know, like, just let us be there. Take it in. Just let us feel some suspense rather than being told what's happening all the time. I made a note here that at 22 minutes in, we're still caught up in the backstory. And that's a pretty significant amount of backstory. That's like a prequel by itself. But that's not to say that I don't appreciate a non-linear narrative. It just wasn't working for me here. Or maybe I was watching the movie backwards. I don't know what was going on. I thought some of the musical choices were weird. The score was by Benjamin Wallfish. And there's a scene where some characters go out on a hunt in the wilderness on horseback. And suddenly ska music starts playing. And I don't know how that artistic choice was made. But then again, you know, ska music can really erupt anywhere at any time. I don't know that ska music can really be trusted because of that. In another scene, there was a moment of heavy metal music that blasts out. And it kind of jumped out at me as maybe inappropriate for the score and distracted me from what I was watching. I'm like, why am I hearing heavy metal music all of a sudden? I don't think of heavy metal music as idiomatic to film scoring. That's for sure. So that took me out of the moment. So just to be sure I wasn't crazy, I looked up the score on Apple Music, and sure enough, I was crazy. It's actually full of heavy industrial metal, like screeching, distorted electronic insanity. It's that kind of thing that will give me a panic attack and running out of the theater. And looking a little deeper, I learned that Benjamin Wallfish worked on Blade Runner 2049, It, Hidden Figures, Shazam, which was an insane score, Batman vs. Superman. So it's kind of crazy that I had never heard of him before. A factoid on Wikipedia says his films have made over $2.5 billion, I'm assuming, in worldwide box office receipts. So, hey, who am I to complain about what a famous film score dude is doing? Here's one thing in this movie that I thought was really cool. There's a scene where Hellboy is fighting a bunch of giants. Sorry about the spoiler. But I was kind of blown away by the animation and the character designs because I've never seen medieval giants fighting like that. They had so many grotesque features and there were so many bad decisions made by the giants, which definitely showed their low intelligence. And anyway, I thought the scene really worked. It had striking cinematography too. The camera exaggerated their features and their movement, and lots of the shots are continuous, meaning there were not many changes of camera angles and edits. Like the camera would flow around the characters, pushing in and out on the action. I just thought it was a well-done scene, and I could have watched a whole movie about Hellboy versus the Giants. Another strong point of this movie was the fight choreography, because the fight scenes were what I'd call properly messy. You know, in the real world, fighting isn't such a clean acrobatic dance. People will grab each other and struggle and get tired and trip over things and knock things over. And there were some cool moments of that here, but not as many as you would see in Daredevil on Netflix. Now, those fights were very brutal. Anyway, I give this movie 3.5 out of 5 stars. A bit better than average for my own personal tastes. Up next, we've got Jurassic World Dominion 2022, starring Star-Lord and Bryce Dallas Howard, and directed by Colin Trevorrow. I think that's how you say it. By the way, he was one of the writers on Rise of Skywalker. Now, I was never into the original Jurassic Park. I mean, it's fine, and I have nothing against it. I would definitely say it was a good movie. I don't have any complaints. And, you know, it's hard to go wrong with a classic by Steven Spielberg and John Williams. But from what I hear, someone really messed up this whole Jurassic franchise, especially with the latest movie. It's gotten a lot of bad reviews, and after watching it, I can kind of understand why. Okay, so this seems to be a movie about a group of humans who have faster reflexes and are able to outrun clumsy reptilian predators. I didn't catch the name of those reptilian predators. I think they were called like Apocalyptoraptors or something like that. All I know is they are like miniature T-Rexes that have poor reflexes. And it seems like all of these movies have that, like another version of the little baby T-Rexes with poor reflexes. Man, that rhymes. Anyway, their reflexes are so poor that the humans can simply like jump out of the way and the Apocalyptoraptors will slam into a wall like Wile E. Coyote and they'll like bonk their head and act confused for a moment. Also, in this movie, there are a lot of characters, and boy, it makes it complicated and hard to follow, hard to focus, and not in a good way. I might like my music to be complicated, but maybe not my movies. You know, in a movie, I only need a few people to watch, like 3 or 5. 3 to 5 characters, that's enough for me. But every scene with this movie, they started another story thread. They brought back a bunch of original cast members playing their original parts, and my wife notices things like this, like they were wearing their original clothing from the old movies, which I guess was, I don't know, a coincidence? Like, what are the odds of that? But then again, I always dress the same. In like 20 years, it's likely I'll probably be still wearing this shirt here, or at least one that looks exactly like it. But here's the real problem I had with this movie. Part of the way through, Star-Lord gets on a motorcycle. And I actually think it was like a dirt bike. And anytime I see a character get on a motorcycle, I let out like an ugh, because I know I'm in for like 15 to 20 minutes of stupid motorcycle stuff. So Star-Lord takes off riding the dirt bike at a high speed down a narrow alleyway, right? And there's this series of shots where he's spending a long time looking behind him at the Apocalyptoraptors chasing him. Like way too many shots in a row where he is not looking where he's going. Anyone who has driven through an alley knows how many obstacles there really are. There's like dumpsters and people loading things and stacks of boxes. And there's probably even cars parked there or coming at you from the opposite direction. But there he is speeding along in an alley, not looking where he's going at all, like for dramatic effect. He's traveling at like, 50 miles an hour or something. Has anyone listening ever ridden a dirt bike? Because I have not. I noticed throughout this movie, no matter what, whether he's running or riding a dirt bike or driving a car. I don't remember if he drives a car. I'm going to guess he drove a car. He's always going just the right speed so that the apocalyptoraptors are snapping at him, but just can't get him. It's like one of those mechanical rabbits on a dog racing track. So with the whole dirt bike thing, here's the other problem. The apocalyptoraptors can keep up with his dirt bike, and it's going what I assume is like 70 or 80 miles an hour. So he's hauling ass trying to get on a plane that's taking off. A plane. And seriously, the plane's wheels are already off the ground. And all the while he's got apocalyptoraptors are snapping at his heels and trying to get him. And at the last moment, he's able to somehow speed up more. And he drives up the ramp into the back of the plane. And guess what? One of the apocalyptoraptors is able to jump in after him. So here's a question. How fast do planes go when they're taking off? How fast would you think they go? Hundreds of miles per hour? For that type of plane, it seems like it's maybe 120 miles per hour, according to Google. And I think dirt bikes can go maybe 85 or 90 at the most. I would expect that at their top speed, a dirt bike would be maybe too hard to control, like you would start getting wobbles or something, especially while being chased by killer dinosaurs. Adding to all this, I don't know what sort of wind difficulties you'd experience speeding on a dirt bike behind a plane that's taking off. Isn't there some sort of like pressure or lift or like whirlwind issue happening behind planes? I'm guessing. But for me, the biggest implausibility problem here is this. How can an apocalyptoraptor run on two legs at like 120 miles an hour? That's like twice as fast as a cheetah, who has the benefit of aerodynamics and crazy physiology and four legs. So that's just silly. There's no way a two-legged dinosaur can catch a plane taking off. Anyway, this movie was so captivating, I got distracted about halfway through and started brushing my cats. There's this thing called a Furminator, and our cats love it. You ever used one of those on a cat or a dog? I can't tell who enjoys it more, me or them. And this is not an ad, by the way, although I wish it were, because I could definitely endorse the Furminator. My point is, since I got distracted, I don't know how the movie ends. I'm assuming it wraps up with the humans just barely outrunning clumsy reptilian predators. Or maybe Star-Lord jumps out of the way and all the dinosaurs just run off a cliff. Or actually, didn't that happen in the last movie? Or am I imagining that? I don't remember what movie that was. So I got to give this one 2 out of 5 stars. It was bad, but not awful bad. And on Letterboxd, I've only given 2 movies anything less than 2 stars. I looked in my history there. One of them was Brightburn, which got 1 star. And I gave Disney's Cruella half of a star for some reason. I'll probably need to reevaluate that, because I can't imagine it being so bad that it would get half of a star. Next up is Black Bear from 2022, starring Aubrey Plaza, Christopher Abbott, who I kind of thought was Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, and someone named Sarah Gadon, written and directed by Lawrence Michael Levine. And this is what might be called a more art film or an independent film, or maybe even a film for grown-ups. I've heard that term before. I heard about this movie from Mark Borchardt, so I had to put it on my watch list. And right off the bat, here's what I love. It's focused on 3 people in a single location. And the whole thing could have been based on a theater play, because it was subtle and slow. And that's what I like to see these days. It was tense. The characters would think about things. And because of that, we can get inside of them. They don't talk constantly and describe what they see. Not to spoil anything, but part of the way through the movie, there's this surreal switcheroo that you'd never see coming. It's one of those whoa, wait a minute. How is this happening now? But you just have to see it for yourself. The second half of the movie is mega dramatic, and by that, I mean the drama and tension between the characters. It's realistic, and it's just a mess. But I can't say I really understood the overall story of this movie, but I did understand that it had this impressionistic, emotional meaning to it. And I enjoyed watching it, and my attention never wandered, unlike some other movies. And the whole thing just made me curious. I do have to say my tastes are evolving as I get older, and as I watch more films recommended by Mark Borchardt. Hey, shout out to Mark Borchardt. 10 years ago, I was a straight-up Marvel fan. But now I'm just easily bored by action movies. So that tells you how far I've come in appreciating pretentious cinema. I gave Black Bear 5 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd because it's exactly the kind of thing I like these days. By the way, if you're on Letterboxd, look me up. My username there is Carl Kingdom. And if you have more films or movies you want me to watch and review on the podcast, just send me an email, show@carlkingdom.com. Here's a special segment. I have this illustrator friend named Ujis Burzins, and he's done some art commissions for me in the past, and I did a Twitch interview with him a while ago. And if you happen to have one of my Patreon stickers, advertising my Patreon, he's the guy who drew it with like real ink and paper and all that stuff. And I support Ujis on Patreon. And this past week, he made a post called Instagram, the Way of the Doo-Doo. In it, he shared his frustration with social media. And I identify with much of what he said, so I wanted to publicly respond. I thought it would make a perfect segment on the Carl King podcast, because we all know I need more segmentation. I don't want anyone getting too comfortable around here, especially with how uncomfortable I feel. By the way, warning, there's going to be some cuss words coming up. Expletives. Okay, so Ujis begins his post with, I had to delete Instagram off my phone. That's in quotes there. I had to delete Instagram off my phone. So he continues this rant on why Instagram sucks by actually pointing out the positives of the whole experience. Quote, Instagram was the first time I had some notion of how many people liked my art. Before that, I posted on DeviantArt and Tumblr, and there was no real way to tell if anyone saw or liked it or if anyone got the joke. And he continues, quote, on Instagram, it was crazy. People who liked my stuff would find me, or people would repost my stuff, and more people would find me, and there were more weirdos with a specific type of humor than I thought. So in a way, I would cater to that a bit, but it helped me at least make stuff. I know it sounds weird, and yes, obviously I didn't write the Great American Comic, but at least I didn't take months off from drawing. This is all Ujis' writing here. He continues, before I went back to school in 2011, there were many years I didn't draw at all, because I didn't know what the point was. Who was this for? None of my ideas were mainstream. I didn't want to draw fan art, at least not in the way that got everyone hot and bothered on DeviantArt. Unquote. So as you can see, Ujis found an audience on Instagram, and it encouraged him to keep going. And I actually checked, and he's coming up on 10,000 followers soon. He's got 10 times the audience I have there. He goes on to explain that because of all the attention he was getting, he made a mini comic, he got it published by Quarter Press, and designed a bunch of creative posters, pins, shirts, and, quote, a fuck ton of stickers. And he was collaborating regularly and participating in art shows. Quote, all of it because I was doing something instead of nothing, unquote. I love that. But his inspiring story takes a dark turn as he says, quote, point is, that's not how Instagram works anymore. It's very much just a clusterfuckle of ads and suggested posts from people who you don't follow. And unless you're making reels, they won't show your shit to anyone unless you pay them. Which is like, wow, okay. Ujis says he, quote, can't bring himself to create more shit for that company. And he points out the difficulty of reaching or expanding his audience since he actually depends on Instagram at this point. Quote, I don't know how to find people. I don't have a backup except to just continue to make shit somehow without losing all motivation. I know people do YouTube shit, but I don't like video. I look like a turd. And people generally have to be either aesthetically pleasing or have a personality or voice or charisma or something. I'm not interested in building up my persona. Also, what the fuck would I do there? Post tiny workshops on how to eat hot dogs or something. If anyone has any idea how to navigate this fresh hell end times world, let me know. Unquote. Okay, challenge accepted. Now, I can't solve all of these problems, but here's my response. Number one, Ujis, I totally get deleting Instagram off of your phone. I've done this many times, but I have discovered that Instagram is way smarter than I am, and a few months later, there it is again. So there's nothing that can be done about that. Number two, I had a strikingly similar experience as you with both Facebook, but also MySpace back in the day, if anybody remembers that. You know, through social media, I was able to find an audience for the first time. I actually used MySpace to literally sell tens of thousands of dollars of CDs and shirts out of my bedroom back in 2005 when I did that How to Sell album. And it definitely changed my life for a little while. It wasn't like I was rich, but I was able to quit my job and kind of live off that. Later, I had a second wave of attention, maybe 10 years ago on Facebook, where my silly posts would easily get like 50 or 100 comments, which seemed like a lot, you know, and that would lead to selling stuff in my shop. And back then I was making, I don't know, several hundred a month at least. And even though I couldn't live off it, it was at least something. But then this thing called an algorithm came along and took that all away. And I went from all that daily attention to honestly zero. If I post something on my Carl King Facebook page, which has 4,500 followers right now, it will seriously get 0 likes, 0 comments, and no one will see it. And I actually have to pay Facebook for my posts there to be visible in anyone's feed. And when that first happened, I got pretty upset because that audience I built up over many, many years was instantly gone. It was like Facebook had canceled my world tour. Now, they may as well have deleted my account, but they actually knew what I would resort to because, you know, like an addict, I started paying to make my pages posts visible, as it felt like it was my only option. Now, from time to time, I still run ads for things I'm doing, if the attention feels like it's important enough. You know, like when I'm doing a Kickstarter or have some kind of major release. But in a way, it kind of seems fair because Facebook is a business and I'm a business, so it makes sense I should pay them. And right now I'm actually running an ad so my followers will actually see that I have a podcast, because otherwise they would have no clue. And it is getting some clicks for sure. Number 3, I think we are in a dark time of social media. And I'm not sure if you've heard of Cal Newport. He's my favorite podcaster and author of So Good They Can't Ignore You, Deep Work, and Digital Minimalism. I think you would really be interested in those books, Ujis. He distinguishes between social media and what he calls the social internet. You know, he has a lot to say about the problems of these monolithic, monopolistic companies like Facebook and why he actually believes that they will soon fail to be replaced with like smaller communities. Now, will that happen? I don't know, but it does make some sense to me. I'm hoping that the current form of social media might just be, you know, a step that gets us from one place to another. And maybe the next phase of it'll be better, or maybe not. You know, here's a weird thing. Have you ever noticed this? No one seems to like social media. Like, I don't know a single person who actually loves it personally. It's more like, man, I know it's awful. I hate it, but I have to use it to promote myself. And I know someone with over 1 million followers who says exactly that. And they complain about the AI feed making them invisible just as much as I do. And I can only imagine what it's like to have 1 million followers and still be invisible. Now, I regularly, and as recent as a couple of months ago, I strongly considered deleting all of my social media accounts, just wiping them out forever. I actually think I've completely deleted and then recreated my personal Facebook like 2 or 3 times now. It all reminds me of this concept called the Abilene paradox. I think that's how you say it, Abilene, where a family of people all get in a car and agree to go on a trip to this, I don't know if it's a fictional place called Abilene. And they're like, hey, that sounds like a great idea. Let's go there. But somehow individually, none of them actually want to go there. And it ends up being a horrible experience. They hate it. And at the end of the day, they're all sitting around, the food was terrible, all this stuff. They all wonder why they went there. So I wonder, maybe in like 10 years, we'll all look back and wonder why we had social media accounts at all. And maybe that's why there's no social media when you watch like a utopian future world of Star Trek. Point number 4, I agree with you about the business scam of creating free content for social media companies to profit from, because they're making money off of our need for attention and desire for an audience. And those are deep desires that creative people have. I can understand wanting to just stop doing all of it, just on principle, because those companies are getting paid and we aren't. And I think about how their janitors are getting paid more than us, because at least they have a constant job and are paid every week. It was a brilliant move, but how long can these companies sustain this if they're destroying the thing that they need? Because creative people actually do need to make a living off of their creative stuff. And if they can't make a living off of their art, they're going to stop doing it, or at least create a lot less or create a lot worse material. And I'm sure there are people like you and me who give up every day because they don't feel appreciated, thanks to being downranked by an artificial intelligence feed. So here's my philosophy. This is what I'm trying to do. I try to avoid posting anything that doesn't somehow point back to one of my creations. Like if you look at my Instagram page, it looks like it's all ads for my stuff, which is kind of funny. But I intentionally avoid photos of me or my food or my pets. It's like maybe every 50 posts or so, one will slip through. I think like 4 months ago, there was a photo of me on a bike. And before that, it had been like a year, there was a photo of me in the desert. So that's how I'm using Instagram. And it does at least get seen by some people. And at this point, every little bit helps. And here's point number 5, Ujis. I know this is getting very long, but you have possibly heard of Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans. And it's this theory that if a creator can find 1,000 supporters to spend $100 a year on their creations, they can make a really good living off of their art. Now, I mean, $100 would be a lot per year, but half of that might be more realistic. I could imagine spending, $50 on Mr. Bungle or something every year. Why not? And I guess for a long time, it was actually rare for someone to achieve that 1,000 true fans. But thanks to sites like Patreon, it's becoming more possible and common. I don't know how many eyeballs need to see your Ujis art to find the 1,000 true fans, but it seems like it can be done. There's this website called Graftreon, that analyzes and keeps track of how much people are making on Patreon. And you can sort it by categories like podcasts, comics, and music. That's Graph, Graftreon, Graftreon.com. John Schnepp used to tell me that he intentionally promoted his own name really big at the end credits of the cartoon show Metalocalypse on Adult Swim. I think it was like the first thing you'd see when the theme music would come on. It would say really big, John Schnepp. And he told me that it was his hope that if just 10% of the Metalocalypse audience would follow him or buy one of his films or comic books, then he'd be set. And I don't know, maybe it was 1%. I don't remember. But I think you get what I mean. I just think that your art is so good and unique that if you can, I don't know, somehow get it in front of 100,000 or 1 million people, you're going to do well. Something's going to catch on. And I know it's all speculative until it happens, but all you need is that one person to see a single Oogis drawing and give you the right gig. These things actually do happen. And of course, point number 6, let's just keep going on. I think there's like 100 of these. Anyway, related to all of that, I'm focusing more energy on reaching my audience outside of social media, and specifically outside of the evil algorithm. And that's one of my major motivations to make this podcast. Like, if someone subscribes to my show, they'll get it every week. It shows up. There's no algorithm hiding me. And 2 other ways I directly try to reach my audience is my email list, which anyone can join from my website. Man, I sound like a salesman suddenly. Or Discord. I don't know if anybody here uses Discord, but I have to say it's a pretty impressive piece of technology, so check that out. Here's the thing. If I see no path to being paid for my work at all, I pretty much don't bother. You know, like you, I don't really, I like how you came up with this little phrase, fake support, in the form of likes. And, you know, I don't really believe in that either. I kind of look at that and I'm like, well, what do likes really mean? They're kind of like fake dollars or something. And there's only so much of that stuff that I can justify. And here's my last point. I promise. Number 7, Oogis. I try to remember that as a creative person, anything that makes me overthink or get discouraged or get blocked is a bad thing. We just have to keep showing up and outputting at 100% no matter what. I think we have to just outlast this stupid technology and this stupid period of time that we're in. And I do worry sometimes about the behavior modification effects. Like, is the Meta company tricking me into making things that their robots will like? Because I think that's likely, but I also realize my occasional desire to quit is a similar form of behavior modification. It's like reward and punishment. Anyway, I really do hope more people that want to support what we do will subscribe to our Patreon accounts. It's really easy and such a direct way to reward our work. I actually support 8 creators there right now, including Oogis. So I say, Oogis, ignore the algorithm, do your thing, keep posting your stuff wherever you want, in whatever form you can, because it's how I found you in the first place. And most importantly, keep going as if things are going to get better. That's all you can do. Now, everyone go and check out Oogis Burzins, or whatever his name is this week. His Patreon is patreon.com/Oogis, UGIS. Or if you're brave, look at Instagram.com/FutureLandfillPress. He's always coming up with different strange names, but his art is just incredible. Go check it out. Speaking of other artists I can promote, who here has heard of Travis Orbin? You know, maybe you heard him drumming all over my Grand Architects of the Universe album because he played the majority of the drums on that big-ass 45-minute piece of music called Hero's Ship or Minimum of One Planet Must Explode in First Act. It was a big prog rock kind of thing. Anyway, Travis has dedicated his life to pretty much 2 things, working out and impossible drumming. And I think he is just a one-of-a-kind drummer for his ability to transcribe and perform this extreme, odd tuplet stuff and crazy time signatures. And for what he does, he's just the top of the food chain, because anything that I give him, he can play. Of course, he has a YouTube channel with nearly 400 videos, some of them covers, lots of Travis Orbin originals, and like zillions of sessions he's done for other artists, and all from his home studio, somewhere in Delaware, I think. And real quick, I'm going to call out 3 of them that stand out to me, and I will add links in the show notes. Number 1, he did a cover of Strapping Young Lad's Shitstorm. And this one is a straight up impressive death metal blast beat nightmare. And you can just see how technical and aggressive Travis is. all those wild floor tom fills and sustained crazy double bass patterns that go on for hours and like this perfect machine gun snare. And this is just like a warm up to him. But watch that and then move on to some other stuff. Like number 2 is a cover of Mike Keneally's Egg Zooming. The song is called Egg Zooming. And the original drummer on Mike Keneally's Egg Zooming was Mike Mangini. You may have heard of him. Mike Mangini claimed it was the most difficult piece of music he ever tracked. It's like 6.5 minutes of, outlandishness. So Travis just had to go and knock it out. No problem, right? And you can hear all the nutty polyrhythms and staggered syncopations. Of course, the weirdo odd tuplets with the quirky Keneally guitar melodies. And last but not least, I had to throw in some of my own tracks that Travis played on, which are also on his channel. I hired him to do a couple of Dr. Zoltan songs from my Why I Am So Wise, Why I Am So Clever, and Why I Write Such Good Songs. He did Join the War on Fun and Upptäckten of Ancient Alien Obviation Ruler Kit. I never thought a drummer would be able to play those parts, so why even try? But it seemed to be no problem for Travis. It was infuriating. I could not believe how quickly he figured it out. He transcribed the entire thing and just killed it, like it was another day behind the kit. So go and watch Travis on YouTube. He's just unbelievable. YouTube.com/C, that's the letter C, /Travis Orbin. I don't know why does YouTube put little letters in, like they have to sabotage everybody's URL. What is with that? Okay, moving on to a new segment. I know you're all going to love this. It's called Cooperstuffstuff. Now, what the heck is Cooperstuffstuff? Some of you may know from a previous episode of the Carl King podcast that I'm a big fan of Skillet. Yeah, that Christian nu metal glam band. As I've said before, I'm highly amused by their absurd personas and their crazy stage shows, and I also love their songs like Awake and Alive. I was listening to that the other day when I was driving down the street. It was really good. So over the past week, I discovered that John Cooper, their lead singer, has his own one-man podcast called Cooperstuff. And I just had to immediately subscribe. The first thing I realized is he starts out every episode urging people to invest a little bit of their money into gold and gives a discount code to use for an investment company. I was hearing that and I was like, oh man, is he going to do it? Is he really going to? Oh, he did it. Yep, he's trying to sell gold. And sometimes he'll do it at the beginning of the episode. Sometimes he finds a way to like cleverly segue right into it. It's like he sneaks up on you and you can feel his Christian beard, his perfectly groomed Christian beard tickling the back of your neck. So I'm sitting there laughing, listening to the show, and suddenly my laughing just turned into like shock because I had no idea what I was actually getting into here listening to this guy's podcast, because he is, and I don't think he would disagree, he's a Christian extremist. Like, not only that, he reads physical books. He posted a photo on his Instagram of all the books he read in 2021, and I counted 35 of them. Now, listeners, how many books did you read in 2021? I'm going to guess, on average, probably not many of you have read as many as Mr. Cooper has. And I'm going to guess maybe I read a dozen. So that's like, what, a third of the amount of books he read? His mountain of books are centered on what it appears to be like a lot of militant Christianity and anger about liberals. And the other theme I noticed about his books is that many of the books have a red color. And it makes me think of, I immediately thought of that whole Rivers of Blood from the Republican convention in like 2016. I think when Trump was being nominated or something like that. I just remember it was like, wow, all this violence and I don't know, it was crazy. Anyway, throughout his show, John Cooper uses the words evil and demonic quite a bit. And at some point, he even said he believes Victoria's Secret in the mall is pornography and that it upsets him to even see it. So it's all pretty intense content, and it seems he's trying to push Christians further to the right. One of his recent episodes is about the culture of death. He calls it the culture of death, which is ironic considering the logo for his podcast is a skull with a dapper John Cooper haircut and gentleman beard, of course. And Eric Alexander Moore pointed this out to me. Every episode of the show ends, or sometimes starts, with a sample of John Cooper screaming this. Cooperstuff! Excuse me, what did he just say? Listeners, what did you hear him screaming there? Listen to this again. Cooperstuff! I think he's trying to say Cooperstuff, which is the name of his podcast, but does it sound like he's screaming the words kill myself? Cooperstuff! I don't know. I think that's creepy. Anyway, because of things like this, I can't help but wonder if the entire Skillet John Cooper thing is like a Neil Hamburger, Andy Kaufman persona prank that he's pulling on everybody. But I enjoyed listening, and after a few episodes, I couldn't help it. I found myself wearing eyeliner and platform shoes, and my wife walked in and wondered what the heck was going on, and I told her it's just, research for my Christian nu metal album. Nothing to worry about. By the way, thank you to Eric Alexander Moore for coming up with the recursive segment name of Cooperstuffstuff. All right, let's wrap up this episode of the Carl King Podcast with a musical artist of the week. There's a musician who goes by the name Via Mardot or Via Mardot. I don't know how to pronounce it. It might be Italian or something. It's, fragile, as they say. Anyway, Via Mardot or Dot, someone shared her music with me on Instagram, and I'm just blown away with the orchestration work. That sounds like something that could be right off of a Secret Chiefs 3 album. And I actually sent it to Trey thinking he might want to hear it, but who knows if he did. Anyway, Via Mardot. I think I'm going to stick with Via Mardot. Sounds, yeah. She's this multi-instrumentalist out of Detroit. And you won't believe this because I don't believe it either, but she plays baritone guitar, cello, various orchestral percussion like tubular bells. Now, who the heck drags a set of tubular bells around? She plays keyboard, violin and viola, accordion, some sort of auto harp, I think, and theremin. That's right, a theremin. And if you've ever tried to play a theremin, you know how impossible those things are. But she somehow plays it flawlessly, like perfectly intonated. And I noticed in some of her videos, she actually plays a saw with a bow and manages to actually play meaningful melodies on it. And I have no clue how someone would do that because the pitch is so variable. Of course, she also sings. And overall, she composes this retro spaghetti western sounding material with a spooky European old-timey vibe with like creepy reverbs and these dark chord changes. I have no idea what's going on with that music. It's all very impressive. It's legit stuff, and I recommend that everybody go give it a listen. She's got a lot of clips on Instagram. Her username is viamardot. Anyway, I predict that she will soon be kind of a big deal, and I'm expecting someone out there is going to give her a big opportunity. I don't know, take her on a big tour or something, and we'll all be hearing about her soon. Well, that's it for this episode of the Carl King Podcast. I am officially covered in sweat, and next time I'll come on stilts, wear a white tie, and carry a tennis racket. Thanks again to Chubode and Hank Howard III, my $50 a month patrons. And remember to support this podcast, head over to patreon.com/Carl King. I'll see you there.